All right, we'll go ahead and get. Oh, that's on. Sorry, we'll go ahead and get started. I didn't think that was going to be on. Thought about giving a 60-second warning, but I was like, no, I'll be patient. First off, does anyone need an outline for tonight's class? My lovely assistant Kendall has graciously volunteered to pass those out. Kendall, get up. Go. It's not gonna. He thought y'all were gonna come to him. It's all right. We'll get there. It's great to be here tonight. Tonight we are going to be talking about friendship. Before we jump into that, just a couple of housekeeping items. So my goal, printer depending, will be to have the lesson 9 and 10 outlines available Sunday morning. So that, God willing, should be back there. So be patient with me, please, while we figure that out. Also, Ben asked me to give a reminder. For tomorrow night at 6:30, we'll have a evangelism class here. He said, be here or be square. I don't know how he said it. Something along those lines. He said, I did. It's good. So tonight, we'll be in Lesson 8. We're going to be talking about the influence of worldly friends. Before we jump in, next, I want to give a quick some thoughts on the next class, next Wednesday, Contradictory Views of Christianity. And just my goal with that class, while you're doing your outline and looking into that, is basically different views on how Christianity is, different doctrinal views that center within Christianity. So you think of it, there's a lot of reasons that children might lose their faith. There could be lack of religious focus, they're just worldly focus. There's and that's not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about more of how do you deal with questions around doctrine that your kids might bring up to you. So that's kind of where my mind went. That was my goal for that. So be thinking about that when you get your lesson for next week. So we'll jump into tonight. First, if you will, let's turn to Acts 12, verse 20. And I was thinking about this, and it was really fortuitous that Miles taught the lesson on friendship this last Sunday. It was either this is a good conclusion or that was a good introduction. I don't know. Well, you can be the judge on what that is. But what is friendship? Friendship of the world, friendship of Christ. I'm going to submit to you that it is influence. Okay, so let's go to Acts 12, verse 20. I'm reading from the New King James Version. Many of you are in the ESV, so it might differ a little bit. It says, Now Herod had been very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, but they came to him with one accord. And having made Blastus, the king's personal aide, their friend, they asked for peace because their country was supplied with food by the king's country. And so again, you can see the New King James, it says having made, and then their friend. Blastus, their friend. What were they trying to do? Herod was mad at them. They were trying to get back in his good graces, so they befriended this guy. They got his influence to try to influence Herod. Okay? ESV, it says having persuaded. So it's kind of interesting that some of the translations throw the word friend in there. Kind of interesting. So for context for this class, for this study, I'm just going to read kind of the first paragraph off of the notes here. For context for this class, for this study, I would like us to consider the influence we allow our young people to have, or other young people to have on our children. Obviously, our children's friends, meaning the young people who they choose or desire to be around, influence our children. That's a given. We all agree to that, hopefully. But other young people who are not necessarily our child's friends also influence them for better or worse. So it can really be, we use the term friend. It can be my best friend. It could be an acquaintance. We're just kind of think of it in terms more of influence to our kids tonight. So what does God think about friendship? Can y'all read that? Yeah, okay, good. I want to kind of go through these pretty quick just to kind of set our minds on the topic and kind of level set here. So I'll go decently fast. The first one here, do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. 1 Corinthians 15:33. And then Proverbs is a gold mine for thoughts on friendship, both negative and positive. He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. The righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. And I believe this is one of the ones that Miles referenced this last Sunday. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. And then lastly, this one, I don't know if you've ever thought about it in terms of friendship, but let me know what you think. And let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the matter of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. That's a little different, but you think of it as influence. We're all here together, right? We're all friends. We influence each other. What kind of friend would you want for your child? It'd probably be someone that exhorts them, to try to stir up good works within them, a positive influence. And so that leads us to our first question tonight. Real simple, where do our children encounter other young people that would have an influence on them? Just start throwing them out. What do we think? Pardon me? School? Yeah, that was my number one. Social media. I had that one too. Good. Very good. Can you expound on that? How so?
For example, they see what some of these kids, the achievement per se, that they get on the social media. If they don't have it, then they're starting to want it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, the term, I use the term influencer in a minute. You'll see, like that's we're talking influence, that's exact, I'm their follower, right? Yeah, whether or not it's a digital friend or in person. What else? What do we think? Teams, sports, take it? Yeah, absolutely. Boy Scouts, yeah, absolutely. Family, oh yeah, family. Both immediate, extended family. Very good, very good. Yes, ma'am. Church, yes. Very good. Okay, yeah. That's a great one. I didn't have that one on there. That shows the differences of where we're at on our parenting walk. I didn't even register. She said part-time jobs. So, yeah, co-workers. Neighbors? Was that a double neighbor? Yeah, absolutely. What else?
Unrighteous families.
Okay, yeah. Extending more.
For example, the cousins of theirs that's living in a house where there's no Christian, but that's the family, and sometimes we just,
Yeah, absolutely. That pretty much covered it. Does anybody have any others? Sophia, you got one? No? Okay. This is what I had. So school, classmates, family. I had the same thoughts, kind of where we talked about Christians, non-Christians in some cases, extracurricular activity with sports, scouts, bands, any type of clubs, neighbors. I put daycare and babysitters sometimes. That's obviously one. Many people choose to do daycares, and that's something you have to look at. Or if you might have younger ladies or men be babysitters, that's something. And then church and social media. So we were all kind of on the same page there. What responsibilities do we as parents have in the friendship process of our children? So you think about that as an actual process behind it. And I'm sorry, I had on my notes to read this little paragraph real fast. Sorry. Thinking back to our own childhood, where were we first exposed to different sins? Think about where you learned about sex, profanity, alcohol, drugs, pornography, etc. If you're like me, most all of those, if not all of them, came from people that I hung out with. Friends are my old age or a little older. We had sleepovers. We talked about that in a couple of classes ago. Teams, whatever it might be. So, with thinking along those lines, what responsibilities do we have as parents in the friendship process as it relates to our children?
Well, we need to know their friends and their parents and communicate with them and let them know why we do certain things. So if we don't allow them to have a sleepover or participate in certain events. So I would say communication with their kids, but also getting to know their parents as well.
Your son's friends and then their parents? Yeah, good. We've had that same conversation come up a lot, and you always feel weird. Maybe it's just me. It's like, well, it's not you. We just don't do that or something. it can be a little awkward sometimes. You feel maybe a little self-righteous. That, again, maybe that's just me. What else? Yes, sir.
Have the friends into your home and not the other way around.
And why is that?
Well, you can control the environment when the child is in your home. You're in control. It's your rules, not their rules, and so you're just put you in control.
Perfect. I also do appreciate the practical advice, because a lot of this is I'm thinking it, and these are actual questions that I have. So I appreciate that. What else do we think? Kyle. So.
I think about Ephesians 6, verse 4, about not provoking children to wrath, but bringing them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. If our children view their own home as a place where there's safety and they have confidence in their parents, and they look to their parents as good examples, and they have a solid foundation of understanding God's Word, it really sort of sets a hedge around them when it comes to some of the influences in the world.
Yeah, and it also seems too, I'm going to piggyback on, let me know if I'm on the same train of thought here, that they want to be at home. It's a safe place, they like it. Of all the places in the world, they want to be there. And that's something that doesn't just happen. Very good. What else do we think? Yes, ma'am, sorry. Communication.
As age appropriately, we have real world experience. I know they think we're dumb and know nothing, but we actually do have real world experience. And communicating, you don't want our kids to make the same mistakes we do.
And I'm happy and also not so happy that you brought that up, because that was going to be my next point. And really, each kind of class, when I'm sitting down thinking about how do we do this, because it can be a very, this is one of the hardest classes to come up with, okay, what way do you want to take this? And so this one took a long time to create, whether or not you believe it by the quality of the material. But communication is the theme that I wanted to bring out tonight, of communicating with your child, that teaching them to think for themselves. So we'll address that in just a second. Yes, sir.
Communication. For me, in my family, we do have a talk with the kids about each of their friends, what they like about their friends, what they don't like, what they would change if they were there. You get a lot of information when you have that thinking process. We've had a lot of friends that have been a bad influence, and by talking through them, like what do you not like, them doing drugs or them doing these parties or these things, then you can set that boundary where it's like, well, you know this is going to happen. You need to make the right choice.
Ahead of time. Almost. Yeah, that's an awesome comment. I appreciate that. Thank you. My thoughts on it. Initially, we have total authority. I mean, it's a baby, right? They don't go anywhere without us. And then slowly they grow up, and we have still total control. You know, Luke, he's 7. He wanted to have a play date with another little boy. And it's like, they can't coordinate that together. It's funny them trying. But it's Sophia and the other mom talking and figuring that out. Then they both stay there. But then, slowly they get older and they get a little bit more independent. And so a legitimate question I have for those that have walked this faith before, or this walk before, is as our child gets older, does that change? Do you give up any type of authority or responsibility or anything along those lines? Or how do you think through that? Yes, sir.
My response is no. You don't ever give that up.
Negotiate with terrorists.
Good.
What you do is basically say, like, you know the rules in this that we've stated. And anything out of those rules needs to be communicated and agreed upon. You leave the house.
Okay. So as they're growing up, start driving, other things like that, there's not ambiguity there. You're going to be home at this time. Like, I'm trying to bring kind of practical. Yeah.
So our rule is that you have to be home at a certain hour. If you're at somebody's house that we know, obviously, then that can be extended, but it needs to be asked at the time of the evening.
Appreciate it. Any other thoughts on that? And Linda, and then Wade.
There's a lot of tools that parents today have that we did not have in raising our children. I couldn't follow them on an app wherever they were, short of putting a some kind of bracelet or ankle around their leg, there's just no way to do that. So there are tools, and as that trust is there, that talking about that communication and understanding what the rules are, and when they break that, then you rein that back in. But we can't keep them locked up until they're 18 and then say, okay, go forth.
Yeah.
We can't do that. We have to slowly allow them to have responsibility, still within our boundaries and within our rules, but those rules change every birthday that that child has, just a little bit. Maybe the rule doesn't change, but the amount of freedom that they have, as long as they're still showing you that they are within your boundaries. And they're respectful at home, they're keeping, you've got all the things that you
It's a whole,
to see.
right.
It's not just, can I go to my friend's house tonight? That's not what it is. It's the whole gamut of the relationship you have and how your child is acting.
Can I give you a hypothetical real fast? Because I would love to talk about Zach. If Zach was 17 right now, and you wanted him to have Life 360, I assume that's probably the app, or something along those lines, on his phone, and he pushed back and was like, Mom, you don't trust me, like this is invasion of privacy, like, no, I don't want to do this. What would be...
He would not be going because that would be part of our boundaries.
Okay. So, good. Okay. You went where I wanted you to go. Okay. Good. Very good. Wait.
I'm not trying to sound redundant whenever you call me, but I keep making the same point. But you do have kind of total control when they're little, and as they get older, you kind of say we serve as a guide. Well, like Tomorrow was lesson on Sunday, have friends that are older and wiser. So if you have the right kind of relationship with your kids, you're going to be the person they come to ask guidance. And when you tell them, as one brother said, this friend who thinks about influence, if you have the right influence, if you have the right relationship with them, the way it should work is they're going to listen to that and really think about it and usually make the right decision in saying that too, because y'all are alive. So it's not dad coming down and saying you can't be that can't be your friend, and then like you see in the movies and stuff, like they don't have the
Right.
If you have that type of relationship that God wants you to have, then you will be a guide to them. Because
Right. That same scenario kept going through my mind when I was putting this together, as far as, because it's kind of a, you see that a lot in the movies, like what you're saying, where they push so hard, no, that person's not going to be your friend, and then you just wish you could rewind, 5 or 10 years and say, okay, at that point you're kind of reaping what you've sown as far as your relationship, and I mean, you might have to go in there and crack the whip per se right then, but ideally that's something that you wouldn't have to do at that point. I don't like doing this type of thing, but I couldn't resist it on this one. Bear with me and see what you think. So this is a take off of 1 Timothy 3, 4, and 5. It's qualification of elders in here. So this isn't messing with Scripture, but there's a thought here that I want to submit that we should all be trying to live up to these qualities. Okay, so bear with me. So insert your name. So Ryan rules his house well, having his children in submission with all reverence. For if Ryan does not know how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? So again, this isn't saying that, elder or anything like that, but do I have total responsibility of my children until they're out of my house? Yeah, absolutely. The buck stops with me. How I manage it is my responsibility. As our children grow, how are we able to speak to them about the reasoning behind our decisions regarding who they spend time with? And I hope this isn't kind of redundant from the last question, but when we get to communication, how do you explain that process to them? And we were kind of talking about it a little bit. What do we think? Do we have that conversation with them?
You have to.
Okay.
I mean, it has to be age appropriate. But how can we expect our children to be trustworthy if we're not going to be trustworthy to them?
Yeah. So a lot of this is actually I think the exact same way, and a lot of this goes into wisdom, right? Yes, sir.
I know it was mentioned a week or two ago about sometimes we want to glorify or stupid things we did, but I think if you remember some of the things that the mistakes you made, I think it's good to be honest with your kids about that and just tell them, say, hey, I went down this road, I did this, I let my temper do this or whatever, and use yourself as an example. Not a good example.
Right. Would you do it as you're like, hey, I made this mistake when I was your age, or like older, or how do you do that?
Whatever the case might be, but
Yeah.
you just know what the cost was, right?
Yeah.
What it cost you, whether it was a friend or maybe it was detention at school or whatever
Yeah.
it might have been, right?
I have mixed feelings on it. I totally agree with you, but I mean, there are certain things too that it's like, man, I wish I hadn't done that, and you know, I almost don't want to put it in my kids' mind of like, hey, you turned out okay, like I'll be all right. You know, I don't know if that makes sense. Yes, ma'am. Heather, yes, been waiting.
Reasoning a little bit. In some situations, I think, yes, there's a place for reasoning. But it's like when you see a parent in the grocery store and they're in a huge argument with a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
That's not the place.
Yeah.
Trying to convince a 3-year-old that what you're saying is absolute.
Yeah.
And there are some truths and some things that we have to follow just because God tells us to, and we follow those. So there's a place for reasoning, but then there's also a place to go back to, this is what it says. And I don't have to explain it to you or convince you this is what it says.
Right. Yeah, there's a time and place for that. I totally agree. And I think age comes into that a lot, you know, because, you know, a 3-year-old not wanting to eat what they're wanting and throwing a fit about that, at some point, look, we don't have to have a full discussion and me explain myself to you. Do what I'm telling you. Obey your parents, you know. A 15-year-old wanting to date, and I say, hey, why? You know, not right now, something along those lines. Maybe that's an actual, you're sitting down and having a logical conversation and hoping they come to the correct conclusion. And if they don't, you still have the final say, you know. It's kind of a guiding them down that path. Yes, sir.
I think some of this goes back to something that's been talked about throughout this entire quarter, and that is you don't start this when you reach the age that you're worried about these decisions. You know, you start with the way that you build this relationship, the relationship that you have with your children from, you know, at a very young age, and you know, you grow that relationship throughout that time. You don't suddenly at some point go, okay, well now we're going to put brakes on, or now we're suddenly going to change the rules. It should, I'm not saying you don't necessarily grow and don't ever change rules, but it shouldn't be something that just comes out completely out of the blue and unexpected.
Yeah.
Compared to how you've treated them all their lives.
Yes, sir.
You know, and also to that point, consistency in parenting throughout, not just in this area, but in all areas, will lend itself to much greater success whenever you have these kind of conversations. If you're fast and loose in other areas, but then you hold firm in this one, it's going to waffle.
Yeah. That seems very almost hypocritical, kind of. And can I throw in continuity between spouses? Sure. Too, you know, wait till your father gets home, you know, and then mom just lets him get away with everything, or vice versa. You know, that doesn't seem productive. Like managing a house, singular, not. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
It's hard to see that whenever you have youngsters at the house. It's hard to realize all the future impacts the decisions you're making now as a parent are going to have, but they're huge.
Yeah. You're just trying to survive, but yeah.
You have to be consistently applied throughout your entire time if you're really going to have an easier time with these kind of conversations.
And I want to get back to that, one of the very last points we bring up. Some hands over here. Oh, Christy, ladies first.
I was going to say, like, when our kids were high schoolish age and we were involved with extracurriculars and things like that, we would be making friends with the parents of the people that are around us as well, and we could model for them on who we would choose as our friends.
Oh, that's great.
Why these would be our friends, or we would not hang out, you know, and just kind of modeling it for them. Like, this is not just something that you have to do, I have to do it too. Be an example.
Yeah, Christy kind of stole us under there. They're going to see your friends that you have.
Yeah.
And then also
Also, you talked about having a good safe space, a good comfortable environment in your own house. Your kids will want to go be like you. And so when they go find their friends and their friends are not exhibiting those traits, it turns them off.
Yeah.
Like they hear language that they don't like because they know that's wrong, and they're like, or whatever. And they get, but hopefully, like you said, you're not flipping that switch at 13, you're flipping it, you're working on it earlier.
Wait, and then we're moving.
Back to Chuck's point when you asked him about, talking to your kids about mistakes you've made. My mom always did that with us, but she didn't always give us the details.
Yeah.
The age she might have just said, I lost my temper, and she may give us some general idea of the situation. I lost my temper because somebody did. He did it to me like a month ago. I was talking about something. She was telling me about how she's not told the truth sometimes when she wish she had it. And somebody starts or a question like, "Hey, what about this?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know," and she's like, "That wasn't the truth." So sometimes it's little things, and this can be general, or depending on the situation. I mean, it's your kids. You may give them a lot.
Yeah. Kid appropriate too.
Tell them they made mistakes without necessarily give them all the details.
All the gory details of it. Yeah. Appreciate it.
You're still letting them know you made mistakes.
Yeah, you're not perfect. There's a standard that you can live up to. So just to kind of sum up kind of what we were talking, asking your child, why do they like spending time with that person? And a lot of the communication, the asking, getting feedback. Keep in mind too that is the huge assumption here is that we as parents or adults in the congregation that we are mature. The worst thing that can happen is you have an immature person giving advice to another immature person. That's a recipe for chaos. And the key here, communication. Kyle referenced Ephesians 6:4 earlier, but bringing them up, an actual present progressive here, bring them up, training them in the admonition of the Lord, and then also how we respond to that matters, and almost to Stephen's point as well. And it's a balancing act as well. To I think it was Heather. I'll give you an example on the negative side. I know a Christian, a sister who was talking on the phone when she was little with a friend, a worldly friend, and it was on a landline. And so the mom had a habit of, she'd pick up the other phone in the other room and listen. Nothing wrong with that. And the worldly friend said a curse word. The sister laughed, because they're in high school, and not that that's an excuse, but the facts. The mom hangs the phone up, goes upstairs, confronts the girl, hangs the phone up, grabs a brush, and beats her with it, without saying a word. Where is that in here? Is there any type of communication? Is there anything? No. You're just a psycho. That's what your daughter sees you as. And then on top of that, the mother had a habit of using profanity herself. So that is not what we're talking about. Sorry, I feel like every once in a while we go deep. So maintaining a tender heart, if y'all remember this, I think it was the very first class, we said there were some kind of isms of the world, kind of worldly wisdom that we talked about. I'd like to submit to you tonight, and I'm trying to get through, I have 2 or 3 questions towards the end that I want to get to, so we're going to go a little bit fast through this section right here. So here's some isms as far as worldly friends go. You can't control who your kid's friends are. He just doesn't have anything in common with other kids at church. He just doesn't like the other kids at church. Sleepovers are just a part of childhood. It's natural for kids to want to fit in. I don't want my kid to be the weird kid. All right, I think that sometimes. Okay, these are, again, all this is from my mind. Okay, so this isn't thinking about anyone else, just squarely with me. Can anyone think of any others that are out there? Yes, sir.
All the other parents like their kids.
Pardon me?
All the other parents like their kids do this.
Yeah. So therefore, it has to be okay. Yeah. What else? Anybody? It's okay. So what does God say? What is godly wisdom? And there are a ton of verses like this. These are just some of the sharper ones, shall we say. Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Wow. and we're worried about our kids being the weird one. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. The example we gave. You don't want an app tracking you? Buy your own phone when you're out of my house. They think it strange that you do not run with them in the same flood of dissipation, speaking evil of you. You're weird? Well, that's good. If the world is the standard, then thank God. Can anybody think of any other verses or thoughts off the top of your head that you would throw out there? Yes, sir.
There's a part of this discussion I keep thinking about the admonitions in the first 4 chapters of Proverbs. I know you have a reference to Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. But what strikes me is that several times in those chapters we see Solomon saying, "My son, hear the instruction of your father. Do not forsake the law of your mother." And then he gives a reason. He says, "For they will be graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck." And then he talks about, in chapter 2, about the benefits of receiving his word. Chapter 3, not forgetting his law. "For length of days and long life and peace it will add to you." You know, there's tremendous benefit to every human being that submits to the will of God. And if we just make it sound like it's a burden, then yeah, worldly wisdom is going to seem very appealing.
Right.
But if we understand and convey often that there's benefit, tremendous benefit, serving God really kind of reshapes the way we think about all of these.
And if we're living the way we need to be living, not perfect by any means, but if our kids do they want to emulate you? You know, are you really benefiting from the marriage relationship you're in, or whatever it might be? Yes, Stephen.
I can't help but think of John 12, kind of last part of that chapter. It's talking about those that love the praise of men more than the praise of God. And that really drove them to deny the Savior and not confess Him as Lord, because of their fear of others. And influence is something that you allow to happen.
Yeah.
So it's really within yourself to allow what amount of influence you would want to receive from a person or from God. And either allow God to be the one that's your source of approval, or allow them to be your source of approval. So that's another verse I would just think about when it comes to influence. That it's really damaging when you put your stock in the views of a person.
Yeah, absolutely. Kerwin, I think.
To add to what you're saying, when you talk about, as for me and my house, we will follow God. It's like, just like you say, how much we want to influence you, we want to follow.
Absolutely. Was there another hand? All right, we're going to jump in. Now, this was the last section, and so there's this question. I have maybe one or two others, but I wanted to give a good amount of time for this. And from the bottom of my heart, I want this to be giving advice. You know, we talk a lot about, or I've referenced several times about the older women giving advice to the younger women, vice versa. Like, there are a lot of people here that have decades more experience than I do, and are way far along the walk. And so, give me some advice, all right? So what advice would you give a child who seems to care deeply about what others think of them? And I think, Stephen, you should have held that verse until right now, because that's probably what I would say. But, yes, sir.
Well, I kind of want to hold this because I wanted to do a sermon on it. But 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2, 3, and 4. "Moreover, it's required in stewards that one be found faithful. But with me, it's a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by a human court." So Paul, number one, is saying that you, Corinthians or others, are not the ultimate judge or standard by which I'm going to live and be judged. Then he says, "In fact, I do not even judge myself, for I know of nothing against myself, yet I'm not justified by this. So I'm not even the true standard, although I think I'm doing the right thing." Then he says, number 3, "But he who judges me is the Lord." So you have 3 different perspectives. You have your friends, yourself, and then Paul says, well, the ultimate one, that the view that really matters, and that was going to be my sermon title, whose view really matters, is the Lord. So helping our children understand that, yes, it is appropriate to think about what other people are going to think about us, and how they respond to us, and things like that, but ultimately, when we know who we are, we don't have to have other people to tell us who we are. And so I think that would be something really big, understanding that being in Christ and even just being a part of our family, right? When you understand who you are and where you're headed, then you don't need all of this, praise or reinforcements from other people, because you already understand who you are and how God, in His view, is the most important view.
Appreciate that. What else? Yes, sir.
I think like everything else, this starts way back. If your child has no self-confidence, then they're going to seek that from someone else to imitate. So if you can instill self-confidence in them, not too much, but if they can keep that in balance, then this won't be as big an issue.
Others? It's Scott.
I was thinking about 2 Peter 3, verse 11, where in verse 10 he talks about all the elements being burned up, and he says, "Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness?" All these relationships we have in this world are not the ultimate end all. All these earthly things are dissolved. That doesn't mean we won't know people beyond this life. We obviously will, but our perspective on things is going to be totally different when we're not affected by the flesh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important for our children to understand that and to care a lot about what God thinks of them and think a lot about what their parents think of them. And there's phases of life where that's really tough. I know it is. Got to reinforce that.
Thank you.
One way, it depends on the age of the child we're talking about, but one way to maybe talk with a child about this that may relate to them is ask them about things that they prefer that have changed over time. Either it's desires over which sports they like, or just all the flavor, whatever you want to throw in there. Every child they've changed their opinion over time. I say, well, that's kind of how you're influenced, the people that you really look up to. That it goes with the wind too.
Yeah.
They change over time, and what doesn't change is seeking the approval of God. His standards stay the same. If we're going to be like Jesus, Luke 2:52, he didn't increase in wisdom, stature, and favor of God and man. It was God and man, because he was following God's will. And when you follow God's will, it's actually truly made up of integrity and something that's of value. It's not just based on the whims of someone else that you're seeking the approval of. And I say, Hugh hit on a great point. We as parents, we need to keep instilling with them that we recognize the good in them.
Yeah.
And we see what they're doing that's good. When we see these other kids bring their friends from school and what's influenced them for the things they truly have convictions about and belief in, we need to praise those kids for, hey, you're trying to involve your friends in things that really matter. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's so hard too with just the age of kids, and if you start, and this is who am I, but kind of my take on some of this stuff. Noah has this cell phone that we have to approve every person that texts him, right? So it's funny. So some little kid will want his phone number. And one time it was a little girl, and she's like, "Can I have your phone number?" And he's like, I got to ask my mom and dad. And he's like, 14. It's really funny. But same thing. It's like he doesn't. Well, he might care. I don't know. But on us, it's like, hey, blame me. That's just the way it is. This is my rule. Wade, go ahead. Sorry.
To your question specifically, how my mom would work is I would want to know, one, who it is and kind of why they care.
Yeah.
It may be that they're putting pressure on themselves because they feel like they have to be a certain way, and not negative. It could be people that are positive influences. They don't want to let them down. So or it may be because a negative thing, so they're trying to be like. So I would want to know why it is they care so much about somebody else thinking, what it is. And then from there, when I've tried to, especially like Viv, since she's getting older, is let her know kind of a combination of kind of what's already been said, right? The true value comes from God and Him being the one who loves you. But other than that, you can only control what you can control. You can't control what other people think, good or bad. So you can try to spend all this time worrying about what other people think, and ultimately you can't control it. You can control what you can do. You need to do what you know you're supposed to do. Do good, do what you're supposed to do, worry about that. And so those kind of combinations.
Yeah. All right, Heather, and we're moving on. Make it good. Just kidding.
We've done with Viv in this situation is when she's having difficulties with friends, especially like at school. I know that in my own life, my mom always thought I was right, even if maybe I wasn't right. She always thought I was amazing and great. But when you hear it from somebody else, another adult that you trust and that you look up to and that you care about, it gives like a double weight to that. So when Viv has always had trouble, we've always had to go on little coffee dates with some of our older lady friends, and that way she can talk to them about the same things she talks to us about. We're aligned
And get another perspective.
and it gives her that kind of confidence coming from another adult
Yeah.
that we care about, that's in our family too.
Yeah.
So that's how has been really helpful.
That's a great piece of advice. Thank you. So mine. All right, Crystal, quick. Okay, she's like, I can't do quick. All right. So on my thoughts. I think of God speaking to Cain. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, and you should rule over it. Like, if you don't want to be different, I'm sorry, buddy, you're going to be different. Like, if you're a Christian, you put on Christ, you're going to be different. Start getting used to it, because it doesn't get easier. Drinking-wise, in high school, people told me I was going to drink. Went to college, oh, you don't drink? Oh, you're going to drink. Oh, here we go. Army, oh, you don't drink? Oh, 5 seconds here, you're going to drink. Sales, professional sales, you don't drink? Are you kidding? That's the only way you're going to get through this. Same thing with profanity, same thing with whether it be not attending services, whatever. It's just going to snowball. All right, what advice, and I'm sorry, but we'll probably only have to take maybe a couple of answers. What if a parent came up to you and asked you for advice? So a parent whose child is drifting with the wrong crowd asks you for advice. What would you give? The assumption is that you're both Christians. What do you think? Not my problem? Paul, yeah.
Verse that we read at the beginning of this class in 1 Corinthians 15:33 says evil company corrupts good habits, but the very next verse says, awake to righteousness and do not sin, for some do not have the knowledge of God. I speak this to your shame. He's speaking to the church of God in Corinth here. My advice would be, man, they need to have the knowledge of God. I did not have that when I stepped out on my own as a young adult, right? And many of you know how that turned out for me. That should be a priority in our lives to really instill them to have that knowledge of God. Open that Bible and immerse themselves in it.
Yeah. So, Crystal, yes.
If it's another Christian coming to you and they're concerned about their child, I think that's where we can step in too and ask, would you like me to spend time with them? That this is where the brotherhood comes in and, you try.
Yeah.
Or, a group of people, because this is a crisis.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. So I want to leave kind of with this. These two points. If you'll, 2 quick Army stories for to serve a point here, if you'll just bear with me. So before our deployment, we had a training exercise in the swamp of Louisiana, and we were on a little outpost, and there was bad guys in the woods, and I was manning this little, in the little headquarters, I was manning this little computer, and when we started getting attacked, I was on this little chat. It was like a AOL Instant Messenger type chat, saying, hey, help us, all this stuff. And there was this senior non-commissioned officer that was there, and we got just destroyed. I mean, it was bad. Afterwards, he came over and he was like, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm inputting data, It's like, you get paid to think. Anybody can do that. You get paid to be above the fray and direct resources where they need to go. You can't be concerned down in the minutia of things, because then no one is thinking. And that's where bad things happen. So my first piece of advice is, as a parent or an adult, you get paid to think. You're the adult. You're above, hey, we're snowed under with soccer and baseball and everything else. Like, you got to think. Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Think. And the second is use your commander override. All right? Last Army story, I promise. My last unit I was with, it was a tank battalion, and there's a couple of positions inside of the tank. And two of them is the commander, and he's outside the turret looking around, and again, he gets paid to think, right? He directs that resource. And then there's a gunner who's in charge of the big cannon. All right, he can independently find targets, but a lot of times he gets worked up into the minutia, and he's over here doing his thing. The commander at any given time has a sight, and if the gun is oriented this way and he sees a threat to his asset over here, he can lays that target and hit the commander override switch, and all of a sudden that barrel comes over. He takes the authority away. And if we need to at some point be above the fray thinking about our children and hit that commander override and say, hey, you know what? That team that you're on, that they cuss like sailors, I know it's select, we're not doing it. And a kid, what? Like, oh, this is my target over here. What are you talking? No. You're not above the fray. You've been alive for about 5 seconds. You don't know. Trust me. All right, so that's all I got tonight. Thank you again, and we'll have the material ready for Sunday. Thank you.